What is up, guys? Today I have the absolute pleasure of working on my first Rolex watch. This belongs to my buddy Eric. He's a dentist, and Eric has a small but very tasteful collection. He mainly gravitates towards vintage Rolex watches, and I have to agree with him. I'm personally not a huge Rolex fanboy or anything like that, and modern Rolex is cool, but vintage Rolex is just next level cool. When you hold a watch like this in your hand, it's kind of hard to explain, but you really feel that history. And these watches just have so much character going on with them. They're just really cool. And I love this watch. It's probably my favorite Rolex model, period. Today it's in for a crystal swap. So if you look from the side here, you can see it's been polywatched to death, and the date magnifier is almost smooth when you run your finger across it. You can barely even feel it. So it's kind of rounded off there. So I'll be swapping in a new crystal. The watch currently is running pretty well, all things considered, and it's not really due for a service just yet, but maybe hopefully one day in the future I'll be able to do something like that. I still have more research to do and more tools to get, but definitely one day in the future would love to do something like that. So one day you guys might see this back on the channel. A little bit more about the watch. This is a Rolex 1675 GMT Master Rootbeer, and this is a phenomenal example of one. The dial is super clean, and so are the indices and the hands. This is tritium lume, so you can see how it's got that ecru color look to it, and it's faded. You know, with all the brown tones of the root beer, I actually think this watch looks better now than it probably did from the factory. Like I said, this watch has aged extremely well. I love this calendar wheel. They were cream like this even when the watch was brand new, but it's just super funky. I love that open six. And like I said, the watch just has so much character going on with it. So as it's gotten older, the bezel has kind of faded a little bit, but it's really held up quite well considering it's aluminum bezel insert. There are some light scratches on it, and there is one deeper one down here by the 8, but like I said, all things considered, it still looks phenomenal. And even though it's a little sun faded, I actually think that makes the watch look cooler. So I'm not going to, drone on about the watch too much longer. Uh, we all know what this watch is, and it's super cool. But let's go ahead and get the crystal swapped in so Eric can enjoy his watch with a better view and, be able to see the date a little bit better as well. All right, so I'm going to start by removing the case back here. To do that, I use a special tool designed to remove Rolex style case backs. In my opinion, this actually works better than more common systems you see. Even though this case back was on pretty tight, this style of case back and that tool makes it really easy to remove. So we'll go ahead and get this the rest of the way unthreaded by hand here, and we can set our case back to the side. And this is just my opinion, but I think Rolex movements look great. I know they're not really known for their finishing, but I really do think they look pretty good. I love that perlage on the main plate, and of course those classic reversing wheels with that Teflon coating on them. Super cool Rolex stuff. And the case back here also has a couple watchmakers marks on it as well, so that's pretty cool to see from the last time it was serviced. So we'll set that aside, and I'm going to go ahead and remove the crown now. zoom in here a bit for you guys. To remove the crown, it's this little screw right there. So I'll grab my screwdriver and we'll unthread this screw here for the crown. Get that all the way unthreaded and the crown just pops out just like that. Now I can do the case screws. These are reverse thread, so if you see the way I'm turning the screwdriver, I'm actually tightening it. And like I said, they're reverse threaded screws, so that's how you remove those on a Rolex. On these GMT style watches, you have to turn the movement to 2 little notches in the case. Once you do that, you can remove it. So it looks a little sideways there, but that's how it's supposed to come out. We'll set our movement aside. Next, I'm going to remove the bezel. To do that, I'm going to use a case back removal tool and a plastic bag. So I'll use that plastic bag to protect the case from getting scratched or anything like that. I'm just going to wedge it underneath like that and pry up on it. Now this bezel was actually installed wrong, so it shouldn't come off like that. And this little spring here is actually supposed to go on top of the crystal retention ring. So whoever installed it last did it backwards. Around the edge of this crystal, there's supposed to be a ring here that actually locks it down into place. But we'll go ahead and remove the crystal. To do that, I'm just going to push it out with my thumb, and it pops out just like that. So we'll get the old one off to the side, and we can install our new one now. This one just pops on. I'm going to align it with the crown tube at the 3 o'clock so it lines up with the date when we install the movement back in. Just give that a little press, make sure it's fully seated, and already the watch is starting to look better. Here's that ring I was talking about earlier. It gets installed like this, and it should come off separate from the bezel. So I'm just going to start pressing it on by hand here. It is quite tight though, so you do need a bezel press to install it all the way down. So I'll press this on with my press here. Let's have a check. Looks like it still needs to go down a bit, so I'll put it back in and we'll finish installing it. When you're installing a crystal like this, you just want to make sure that you're applying even pressure to that retention ring. Otherwise, there is a slight risk you could potentially crack the crystal. So I'm just rotating the case around here to make sure that ring is getting pressure applied evenly around it. And it looks pretty good, but let's have a closer look. And that's definitely looking much better. Nice and evenly seated all the way around the case. So that's exactly how it should look. And it's already looking better with that new crystal. So super happy with that. I'm going to clean out the case with some air. Going to also clean the dial with air as well. I did set this under a dust cover, but still want to clean it off just before we install it into the case. So this is how they get installed, kind of sideways. And then when you flip it over, you can rotate the movement to where it locks into place. And now I can reinstall the crown. I'm going to thread that crown setting screw back down until it's tight. And then check the crown just to make sure it's functioning properly. So it's engaging. Now I can reinstall the case screws. So we'll get these tightened up. These are reverse thread again, so it does look like I'm loosening them, but I'm actually tightening them. So just one of those funky Rolex things, but super cool. Just double check them real quick to make sure they're both nice and tight. And they both feel good, so that is looking good. Gonna reinstall the case back now. Thread that down. And let's have a look at that new crystal. This watch is looking so much better already. Here it is compared to that old crystal that was faded and scratched up, and that date magnifier. Look at the new one. It's sitting proud above the crystal and looks much better. And also the magnification is as it should be now as well. We'll go ahead and reinstall that bezel spring, and I'll install the bezel as well. This just clicks down. You can click this on by hand. Nice satisfying click when it's all the way installed. Bezel feels good, nice and smooth. It's rotating as it should now, so that feels much better than what it did before. Here's a final look at the watch. It really came out great. A new crystal really breathes life into a vintage watch like this. The dial definitely deserves to have a clear view of it. So it is really cool how just a quick crystal change like that can make a watch look so much better. I love these vintage acrylic crystals, how they sit proud of the bezel. They just have their own unique character to them and a really cool feel to them as well. Now, they definitely do scratch up a lot easier, and eventually, after polishing them, they do even wear down the date magnifier, but they're easy enough to replace, and they're actually pretty cheap as well. Like I mentioned, the bezel feels great and is operating like it should. I want to thank Eric again for trusting me with his watch. This is a very beautiful watch, and it's a very expensive watch as well. So I want to thank him for that. I also want to thank you guys for coming along and watching the video. So that's going to do it for this one, and I'll see you guys in the next one.